Good morning, guys. Just going to bring you through the Galleria interface. This is the software as a service we use to attach to our Galleria database, which is primarily a regulatory database, but as you can see on these buttons here, we have some other information like chemical identification, properties, health-based information, and environment. So we split the database up into these 5 categories, and we can further split it with these filters at the top. But what I'll do is I'll start using the program and we'll go through each of the features one by one. So quite similarly to the main application, ChemFFX or Hazardous, you have this search type here in which you can search by name or CAS, which is just like the main program. UN number, shipping name. We have our own Galleria number here for items that we can't index with CAS numbers or anything else. You've got the structure searching like you do in the main program, and also another whole bunch of other search indexes. These are various identification numbers from regulations around the world. So just starting, I can search for a chemical by name and I'll get a hit list of results and I can pick from these. But I'll just pick benzene, and immediately what happens is the program goes out and looks for all of the regulations, or all of the lists, prefer to say, in database that have benzene listed on it or make reference to benzene. Now you can see here from a list I have ticked the regulatory, and within regulatory there is 4 other subcategories. Furthermore, I can go and click on all of these and pick up all the information. As you see, as I've clicked those, it's just loading, and this list has got even longer. You can just see the vast amount of information you get from a single search. So, in honing in on the information we want, let's say we do want regulatory information, I can then go and untick these others, and as I do, you should see the list getting significantly smaller. And you see that happens there. Now, to look at any of this data, all I need to do is click on, and I can see information coming directly from that list for that record for benzene. Moreover, I can see the reference information here. If I click on the little ref icon, it tells us the reference of the data. This little P path icon just shows me exactly where I found that data within Galleria. It was in the regulatory section under exposure limits and then under emergency exposure limits. And finally, when I see this gavel icon, I can click on it and see the full text regulation in which we got the data from. So this is the official document we got the data from, and once it loads up, you'll be able to see exactly where we got the data. So if you see something that you think looks weird or unusual, you have every opportunity to come directly to the regulation from where we sourced it and check it for yourself. I'll have a look. So there you'll see the list that we got this from will be in here somewhere. It's probably that list there. Moving on, so here I can now also start to filter by region. As you can see here, I'm getting regulations from everywhere. Here's Romania, Singapore, the US, Saudi Arabia, etc. Let's say I was just interested in the Americas. I can click on the Americas and take off the world. And what I get now is everything from the Americas, which includes North and South America. You see here. Now, I will also get regulations that are international of nature, so, or global, so to speak. So when we filter for any particular country or region, we will filter for regulations of that country, regulations of that region, and then ultimately global regulations. So global regulations will show no matter what the filter is at the top. I can take the filter a little bit further and click on this down arrow and look at a particular country or countries. So I can edit this. I can decide that I'm only really interested in the USA and Canada. Click OK. And now we see that the list further filters by just US, Canadian, or global lists, which we should see one soon enough. Here's a global list. Here are some more global lists. So as far as searching for data finding it and viewing it. That's all you need to do. I'll just also mention a couple more things. Every time you click on some data to look at it, you can see the CAS numbers associated with the chemical you've selected. You can also see something we call the group codes. Now these are the what is sometimes referred to as generics. Things in regulations, you quite commonly get a record that does not pertain to a single chemical, but rather a group of chemicals. Hovering over each of these group codes actually tells you the chemical groups in which we have assigned benzene to. So this is benzene, and this first one will show you that it is aromatic hydrocarbon. So if we get a regulation that cites aromatic hydrocarbons as a whole, benzene would bring up that record because benzene has been added to the group of aromatic hydrocarbons. So you can see here there are loads of different groups in which we've assigned benzene to. Moving on to reporting and picking up information. Now because there's such a vast amount of information here, most people don't want to look through all of it. When you saw that we did a search for benzene globally, which I'm just bringing back now, you can see here that there is, once you've done this search, you've got a whole nother search to go through to find the list you want. You know, there is probably over 1,000 lists displaying here. So we have this navigation panel over on the right, and part of that navigation panel has this index. Now this index is a list of lists. It's just listing all of the lists that we have within Galleria. Once they load up, I can click on this apply filters, and it will apply the same filters I have set here to this list. But moreover, I've got a search here, and I can search for lists such as a TSCA list. But I can also search for keywords too, like the keywords such as OEL is commonly used for occupational exposure limits. That sort of keyword will pick up all of those lists. So I've just done this TSCA search. It's told me I've got 45 hits out of the lot. I can go now looking for the particular regulation that I'm after. Okay, so I have a list that I'm interested in, and I can just pick a couple more for the sake of it. And what I can do is I can just hit submit at this point and close this down. And now I can see that I have just those lists of interest. And now I can start doing searches again before and search just within these lists. So rather than scrolling up and down the page, I could even have a list of 20 lists here that are of interest to me. And I can then look at the data as I would normally, but just searching within this finite set. Again, should bring me up this TSCA. And now I see the data for acetone. Now, I'm going to close that. I'm going to go back to the index. So I've quickly shown you how you can search the index and create a set of lists to search within. Now, I may have a set of lists that I want to search for one particular reason. I may have a different set for another reason, or I might just have a large set of 25 lists that I'm regularly looking through. And each time I do that, I don't want to come here and pick those same 25 lists to search on. So what I can do, I can create something that's called an auto, and an auto stands for auto lists. So up here in the create auto box, I can put a new list, and I'll just call it today test. I create that auto, and now we see that auto name appears there here with all the other autos I have in my other list, but here's the one I've just created, today's test. And in here, I'm going to go start putting a bunch of lists. So I've just searched for the term OEL, which brings me about 230 various lists of occupational exposure limits and other related lists. So I'm just going to pick a couple of them. I'm going to pretend that I'm selling to these states in Canada. And I'm just going to pick a few more random just to proof of concept. Where I have things in various languages, I have the flag underneath. So here's the European OEL, indicative OEL limits. I can pick that up in Dutch and English if I wanted to. I'm just going to pick a few more. I'm going to do, now that I've picked some lists, I can at any time click on View Current Selection, and this will show me the currently selected lists I have, and I can toggle back to view all back and forth. But while I've got those lists ticked, those 9 lists, I'll just wait for that to finish loading. I can click Save Auto. Now what that's done is that's just saved those 9 lists to this set of lists called today's test. And I'm just going to do add a few more just for the sake of it. And I'm just going to pick up some drug lists. I'll pick up all these Australian poison schedules. I've got the Bermuda controlled drugs there. Okay, I'll pick up these as well. And so I've ticked some more. I'm going to save auto again, and that's saving those. And at any time, like I said before, I can click on that view selected list, and we'll see now that that's moved to 16 lists. Now, I'm just going to close this and pretend that I'm coming back on another day, and I want to do those same searches. So now all I need to do is come to the index. And as soon as the index is loaded, I can now select an auto from here, and the auto being the one I just created, today test. And if I load that auto, and it tells me that it's been loaded, I will see now that those same 16 lists are pre-selected for me. And the moment they're pre-selected, I can just hit that submit. And now I'm searching within those lists only. So I can start searching a bunch of chemicals. And what I didn't mention before is I can search here by CAS as well. -84-9, I believe that's the CAS for 2,4-TDI. And I can search that, and I can see that it comes up on all of my occupational exposure limit lists, or most of them, not in the drugs list, which is probably what I expected. So here again, I can start viewing data. Now the last piece of this puzzle is, how do I get the data out? How do I make use of that data elsewhere? So there's a couple ways of doing that. The main way is really we create something called a file, and this is a file of data. Now I'll make a brand new file, and I will call that today test file. And once I create that, I have now today test file has been created, and it's now available from my list of files to pick up. So I can now just say save this data to that folder. And when I click that, it's telling me that this data for toluene 2,4-TDI has now been saved to today test file. And I can go on and continue to search chemicals, get their results, and each time I do it, I can save that to folder as well. I'm just going to put in a drug of some sort to get some different lists coming up, hopefully. There we go, Bermuda controlled drugs. I save that to folder, and I'll just do one more. search one more high production volume chemical, which again will give me most of these OELs, and I save that to folder as well. So I've searched a couple of different chemicals among the same lists, and I've saved them to folder each time. Now I can go back over to the navigation, and I have this thing called File Manager. Now File Manager will show me the autos that I have created, including the one that I created today, today's test, and I can click on it and I can actually view what lists I have in there. And so I'm a little bit sidetracked just showing you this, but this was the auto I created before with the lists that we just saw that I was searching through. I come back to the list, I can switch back to files. Now files is where I've saved all my data, and we can see here today test file. So first things first, I can click on that and just get a nice human readable report of the data that I've just saved. So here was for the chemical TDI, 2,4-TDI, and I can see I picked up these various exposure limits, and I can see them tabulated here one after the other. Quite a nice report for a human to read. Again, I did benzene as well. I can see the data for benzene. I also did this amphetamine, which I got information out of this list here. And then again, acetone. So you can see all the data, and I could have kept adding to that as I go. And I can continue to add to this in future. I can print this as is. I can save this as a PDF, and I can close this. So that's just to get a report as such. Now, I can also do an export of the data. And when I do an export of the data, I get a couple of options. First, I'm asked, do I want to export the reference information with the data? And all that's asking is, do I want to export the reference data pointing back to the body who created the regulation, or the date of the regulation, and that sort of information? I will add that in. Then I have some options of how do I output this. Do I output this as a delimited text file or as an Excel file? I'll pick Excel for the, well, actually I'll pick text first, and you notice when I've got text picked, I can then also pick what my delimiter is. So I can even tell it other, and I can put in something like a pipe if I wanted to. But for the purpose of this, I will just use Excel to start with. And so I click OK, please. So what's happening now is I can save this data, I can continue. As you see, each time I save this data, I'm getting each list. So I continue to the next list, save the data. Now I'm getting the British Columbia limits, continue, save the data. I'm getting now the limits for another state, continue, and I go through that for each list that I put into that file. Now, the point I want to make here is it all can't be exported into one single file, because each of these lists can have their own format. So here's the data for any one of the lists that I put into that file, and here you can see there are 3 chemicals there, and these are the 3 chemicals that got a hit on that list. The reason, I'm not sure if I explained properly, the reason why these have to be saved individually is because they can vary in format quite significantly. So this will just bring you through each of the ones, and now I'm at the last one, and that's it. I have all the data now saved into my downloads. Here are all of the lists. So there's the Bermuda Controlled Drugs list with the data in it that we pulled out. So probably the last point to show here is that we also have a batch loader or a batch query tool, and that's called MyGal, and that's also run from the index, and it also uses you can also use your autos to define lists, or you can come along and just tick lists randomly one by one. So back into the index, I could start ticking lists here again like I was doing before, or I could again say, come to my today's test auto and load that auto. And once I load that, I should see that, yes, my 16 lists are there again. And now, rather than submitting these lists to be searched upon one by one, I can click this button, MyGal Extract. And once I click that button, what I see is I will see the 16 lists that I selected earlier. And I'm given this little window to tell the program what delimiter I want, and we use a pipe by default, but you could make that whatever you want. You can make that an ampersand, you can make that a space. I like to use pipe because I never see pipe as legitimate data anywhere, so it makes a really good separator. Now, at this point, I can start entering CAS numbers, and theoretically, the limit, I'm not sure what the limit is, but I've pasted up to 30,000 CAS numbers before, and I've been able to do that. So it's somewhat limitless, so to speak, from a practical point of view. But if I'm just going to type some in. I didn't prepare some earlier, but I'm just typing in ones that I know off the top of my head, which isn't many. But if you can imagine I had a spreadsheet with 20,000 CAS numbers on it, I could just paste in all 20,000 of those CAS numbers. 67, 64, 1, I think is ascertained. So here are 4 CAS numbers. There could easily be 40,000. And now I just clicked extract data. And I just get a little question asking me if I want to clear the previous data that I extracted using MyGal. And of course I say okay. And the extraction is complete. And now what I find is I can come back here and download that data. And when I download it, it'll download it as a little zip file. So I'm now going to go into where I have that zip file. And I'm just going to pop it into its own folder just for ease of showing this. So here is the zip file that I downloaded from the program, and I'm going to extract it here. And we see here now I get a whole bunch of files, and they've got all these code numbers which don't mean a hell of a lot. These are all these text files are delimited data that came out of the query. And with every MyGal query, you also get this file called the index file. And this index file is a delimited file that then shows you what all those numbers mean and which regulation they relate to. What I'm going to do is, because these are all delimited, they can be pulled into any sort of database program, from Excel to Microsoft Access to Oracle to anything. But I'll just go and open it with Excel. What's the best way to do this? Open Excel. And from Excel, I will open other workbooks. Browse, I need to go to my downloads, new folder. And I want to open text file. So I'm going to open that, and here it's a delimited text file that asks me, yes, I can now use my pipe delimiter. And you see now I have the data formatted nicely here. Now, this index data comes along and just simply tells you which one of these numbers relates to which of the regulations that you asked for. Here is the reference information that we initially said that we wanted to pull out. And here on the end, you see this data found, yes or no. So as long as one of those chemicals was found in one of these lists, you will get a yes here. And you will only get separate files for each of these ones that say yes. So when I go back to my folder, I see here that I only have got these files because these were the only ones with data in them. And these are all delimited files with that same data in them that can be pulled into Access, Microsoft Access or Excel or any of those types of database programs. Just the last thing to mention with this is where we have it, we also give you our notes on that particular regulation. So generally we do a summary of regulations and what the regulation does and what some of the items in the regulation refer to, and that comes along with the MyGal download. So that more or less finishes it. There are some other features, but they're only sort of minor. I'll just quickly go through them. We have a legs and regs section just where we keep full text regulations. So within here we will have all of the full text regulations that you can see under that gavel icon in other parts of the program, but we also have regulations here that don't really have chemical lists. So there might be a regulation, this Abu Dhabi recycled water and biosolids regulation. It may or may not have a chemical list in it that we can index, but if it doesn't, we have a copy of the regulation here for you to have a look at if you would like. And you can search this regulation as well, this list of regulations like you would normally searching a list. And here I'm getting some drugs list again now. So like I mentioned, a lot of these are indexed within the program, but some of the data in here simply just doesn't have chemical lists in it. They're regulations pertaining to chemicals, but they're not listing chemicals per se. So there's no way that we can index them as a list. Other than that, that's about it. That pretty much shows you, you know, 95% of what this program does as far as searching for data, saving it into files, and then exporting that data. I did think of one other thing, sorry, that I'm going to show you. If I go and do a search like I did a normal search without using a set of lists or anything else, at any time I can put random information into that file as well. So coming back here, I could have gone, oh no, I'm very interested in this Kazakhstani list here. And so I can click on the little F, which will open up that file toolbar, and I can go back to that today's test file, and I can say save. That automatically saved it for me. So I've also saved now data for benzene from this Kazakhstani list into that same file. And I'll OK that and close that, sorry. And if I go back here, I should see now that in today's test file, I also have for benzene some data from the Kazakhstani list. So I can keep building to this file in an ongoing manner, whether I use the auto lists or whether I'm just doing a basic search. Anytime I can add data to this. One other thing I haven't mentioned here as well, where we see this A icon, we can